Hello, I'm Tatiana Maiska.
And I'm Marina Nikandrova.
And we are going to present our joint work with Marcelo Fernandez entitled as Imposing Commitment to Rein Overconfidence in Learning. It's widely documented that people often display overconfidence. In his interview to The Guardian, Daniel Kahneman said that overconfidence is the most damaging bias among all biases that affect the decision-making. And if he had a magic wand, it would be the first one he would eliminate.
Overconfidence is so troubling because it often affects not only the decision maker who suffers from overconfidence, but also other people who do not suffer from such misconceptions. For example, an overconfident CEO might behave irrationally from shareholders' perspective. An overconfident fund manager might take excessive risk from an investor's perspective. An overconfident judge may neglect important information and reach a wrong decision from the society's perspective. An overconfident physician may be too rushed in diagnosing a patient. In this paper, we take the perspective of a rational principle and look for the optimal contract for an overconfident agent.
In our model, the agent has exclusive access to an information source that he listens to in continuous time. Listening to the source is costly, and the agent's main decision is when to stop listening to the source. We model overconfidence as overprecision. More specifically, we assume an overconfident agent believes that the information he collects is more precise than it actually is. The principal wants to maximize the amount of information that the agent collects and can choose between two contracts. The commitment contract requires the agent to commit to the amount of time that he spends listening to the source, and he commits prior to collecting any information. The flexible contract allows the agent to choose when to stop listening on the basis of the reviewed information. We show that the principal chooses the flexible contract when the level of overconfidence is below some threshold, and the commitment contract when the level of overconfidence is above that threshold. We endogenize the overconfidence level, and in addition to the type of the contract, allow the principal to select the overconfidence level. Then it turns out that hiring the rational agent is not always optimal. More precisely, the principal selects the rational agent when the learning cost is low. If the learning cost is high, she selects an overconfident agent, but ties his hands by offering him the commitment contract.
Moore and Healy classify overconfidence into three categories: overestimation, overplacement, and overprecision. Our notion of overconfidence is closest to overprecision, which arises when individual believes that his information is more accurate than it actually is. There is a number of other papers which study overconfidence defined in a similar manner. Our paper belongs to the literature on misspecified models, in which the support of a prior does not contain the actual state of the world. We assume degenerate prior about the precision of information, which means that the agent does not update his belief about this precision. In some papers, such as De La Rosa 2011, information collection happens outside the model, and overestimation of a precision of one's information leads to over-reliance on prior. That is, there is overprecision of prior. In contrast, we model information collection explicitly and assume no overprecision of prior. However, because the agent overestimates the precision of the information he collects, overprecision of posterior arises endogenously. The paper that is closest to ours is Gervais et al. 2011. The paper considers a model where the agent has a binary decision of whether to collect the information, and in this model, the principal unambiguously prefers hiring more overconfident agent. We consider incremental information acquisition and show that hiring an overconfident agent may be optimal only if a principal offers him the commitment contract and the cost of learning is sufficiently high.
Here's the model. The state of the world is binary. The goal is to guess the state. The principal delegates guessing to the state to the agent. Both the principal and the agent get 1 if the guess is correct and 0 otherwise. At the outset of the game, both the principal and the agent share the same prior about the state, and we assume the prior is uniform so that both states are equally likely. Before making the guess, the agent collects information by observing a Brownian motion process with state-dependent drift and variance normalized to 1. When the agent observes this process, he pays a flow cost. That is, the cost is linear in time. For simplicity, there is no discounting. While the objective variance of the process is 1, the agent misperceives this variance and thinks that it's equal to 1 over eta for some positive eta. We call parameter eta the level of overconfidence. Higher eta means lower perceived variance, that is, higher perceived precision of information. By modeling overconfidence this way, we make the agent's model misspecified. That is, our agent is not aware that he might be wrong about the variance. If the agent doubted his perception of the variance and updated his belief about the variance as he observed the process, then in our model, he would have been able to learn the true variance with certainty immediately. And this is the well-known property of the Brownian motion. In light of this, one might be wondering how realistic it is to assume that there is no updating on the variance. Indeed, our agent is sophisticated enough to be able to learn about the drift of the Brownian motion, but at the same time unable to solve a seemingly simpler inference problem and deduce the variance. What we argue is that the lack of variance updating is actually a virtue of our model. One reason for this is that learning variance of the Brownian motion requires unlimited attention and mental capacity to acknowledge every point of the information process. In reality, human attention and memory have cognitive costs, which makes it optimal for people to ignore information that they perceive as irrelevant. In our model, the agent believes that he knows the variance, so deems irrelevant any information to the contrary. Furthermore, learning the variance may not be at all a simpler cognitive task in practice. There is a lot of experimental evidence suggesting that updating the mean and updating the variance are not equally difficult tasks. For some reason, people find learning the variance much harder. And on the top of that, the assumption that our agent does not update his belief about the variance can be motivated by self-image concerns. Specifically, he may unconsciously refuse to update the variance to maintain positive self-image about his ability to understand information. Okay, the principal chooses between two contracts, commitment and flexible. Both contracts allow the agent to choose any stopping time between 0 and plus infinity. In the commitment contract, the agent has to choose the stopping time at time 0. In the flexible contract, he can adjust the stopping time based on the collected information. That is, at any moment he decides whether to stop or not. We want to emphasize that there are no transfers between the principal and the agent, so the principal's choice is binary. She offers a commitment contract or a flexible contract. In an extension, we consider a model with transfers and our results carry over to this alternative setting. The principal chooses the contract under which the agent makes the correct guess more often. We assume the principal knows the level of overconfidence. In reality, the overconfidence level can be imperfectly measured through, for example, various personality tests.
We start with the agent's problem. If he faces the commitment contract, he chooses the stopping time at time 0, that is, before he observes the realization of the process. Upon choosing the stopping time, the agent observes the realization of the process and stops at the pre-committed time. The stopping time is independent of the realized sample path. On the slide, we depict two realizations of the process. For both of them, the agent stops at the same time. In contrast, under the flexible contract, the agent can adjust the stopping time in response to the realized sample path. The agent faces the optimal stopping problem, and we know that the solution to this problem has a threshold form. There are two thresholds, which are symmetric around 0. Once the process hits one of these thresholds, the agent stops. If he stops at the upper threshold, he guesses 1. If he stops at the lower threshold, he guesses -1. As you can see, under the flexible contract, the agent may optimally stop at different times for different sample paths. To sum up, under the flexible contract, the agent chooses the stopping threshold chi and stops at a random time, which is defined as the first moment when the process reaches either chi or -chi. Under the commitment contract, the agent commits to deterministic stopping time t at the beginning of a game.
Let's start with the rational agent. For the sake of this slide, let us denote by P the probability of the correct guess and by TE the expected time the agent spends collecting information. Consider first the commitment contract, where the agent fixes the time. For any given time, we can calculate the probability of the correct guess, and thus we get the Pareto frontier that describes all combinations of P and T that the agent can achieve. When the contract is flexible, the agent can adjust the stopping time on the basis of the revealed information. And in particular, it means that he can always replicate his behavior under the commitment contract, where he doesn't make any adjustments on the basis of the revealed information. In other words, his strategy space is larger under the flexible contract than under the commitment contract. On the picture, it means that the Pareto frontier for the flexible contract lies above the one for the commitment contract. Under both contracts, the agent maximizes the probability of the correct guess, P, minus the cost of collected information, which is equal to the flow cost C times the expected time, TE. As we can see from the picture, in the optimum, the flexible contract always gives a higher probability of the correct guess. And so if the agent is rational, the principal always chooses the flexible contract.
Okay, we know why the principal might want to choose the flexible contract. We demonstrated the benefit of flexibility in the special case when the agent is rational. But intuitively, the same logic also works when the agent is overconfident. Now, the next natural question is there any reason why the principal might want to choose the commitment contract? As we just saw, the commitment contract is never optimal when the agent is rational. And so if there is any reason for the principal to offer the commitment contract, it must have something to do with overconfidence. Overconfidence has three effects on the probability of a correct guess. First, there is the cost effect. Higher precision of information effectively lowers the flow cost of learning, thus incentivizing the agent to collect additional information by listening to the source for longer. We intentionally chose a symmetric setting with the uniform prior belief and symmetric payoffs. Due to the symmetry, larger stopping time always means higher probability of a correct guess. So the cost effect works in favor of a principal. Another way to look at the cost effect is that it makes the agent willing to collect more information at the margin, so that he considers flow costs and benefits of information at a given moment. In contrast, the oversaturation effect works through the stock of collected information. As we increase the level of overconfidence, the agent's perceived precision of already collected information increases, which makes the agent's posterior belief more extreme and lowers his willingness to collect additional information because he is already quite certain about the state. So the oversaturation effect works against the principal. These are the only two effects present under the commitment contract. The flexible contract, however, adds the third effect, which we call the hyperacusis effect. In sum, the cost and the oversaturation effects are present under both contracts, and so the principal cannot control them by her choice of a contract. the hyperacusis effect is present only under the flexible contract, and so the principal can switch it on and off through her choice of the contract. The hyperacusis effect works in the same direction as oversaturation effect. Higher level of overconfidence decreases the probability of a correct guess. By choosing the flexible contract, the principal turns this effect on. Since it works against the principal, it gives us the argument against the flexible contract that we were looking for. The hyperacusis effect itself is somewhat more subtle than the other two effects, and we will give more details in the next slide. But in short, overconfidence makes the agent more sensitive to noise, which he perceives as useful information, hence the name of the effect. Flexibility allows the agent to react to this noise by stopping information collection prematurely.
More specifically, there is a discrepancy between what the agent expects to see and what he actually observes. Here's the sample path of a stochastic process that the agent expects to see. That is, the process with the perceived variance 1 over eta. Under the flexible contract, the optimal strategy is a threshold strategy. In the figure, the thresholds are depicted as red dashed lines. Once the observed process reaches one of two thresholds, the agent stops and makes a guess. 1 if the process hits the upper threshold as on the picture, and -1 if the process hits the lower threshold. For the sake of the example, suppose the state is 1. Then the dashed blue curves indicate the 5% and 95% percentiles of the information process, given the perceived variance. In contrast to the depicted process, these percentiles are deterministic and help to visualize how on average the process would evolve. Okay, that's what the agent expects. Now, in reality, the agent observes the process with a higher variance, which corresponds to a wider cone delineated by the 5% and 95% percentiles. Note that the stopping thresholds remain the same. For the sample path of the Brownian motion that is depicted in the figure, the agent stops at T1 instead of T eta. That is, the agent stops sooner than he originally expected. The percentile curves indicate that the depicted sample path is not special. On average, the agent stops sooner than he expects, which lowers the objective probability of the correct guess. Moreover, the higher the overconfidence level, the higher the discrepancy between the expected stopping time and the actual stopping time, and so the higher the hyperacusis effect. Let us emphasize once again that this effect happens only under the flexible contract, because the commitment contract prevents the agent from reacting on the discrepancy between what the agent expects to see and what he actually observes.
In sum, we have one argument for the flexible contract and one argument for the commitment contract. The flexible contract is better because it leads to a more accurate guess from the agent's perspective, that is, given the perceived variance. In particular, it means that the flexible contract is better when the agent is rational, that is, when the principals and agents' estimates of the probability of a correct guess coincide. On the other hand, the commitment contract is better because it eliminates the hyperacusis effect, which under the flexible contract exacerbates the overconfident agent's deviation from the behavior that is optimal from the principal's perspective. The level of overconfidence only affects the strength of the second argument. The higher the level of overconfidence, the stronger the hyperacusis effect. And so the stronger the argument in favor of a commitment contract. This logic leads us to the following theorem. There exists a threshold such that when the level of overconfidence is below this threshold, the principal chooses the flexible contract. When the level of overconfidence is above this threshold, the principal chooses the commitment contract. The threshold increases with the flow cost of learning. Intuitively, the lower cost of learning, the smaller the difference between the commitment and the flexible contracts for the rational agent. In extreme case, when the cost is close to zero, both contracts would lead to pretty good guesses anyway, and so the argument for flexible contract is weak. that increases the parameter region where the commitment contract is optimal.
So far, we took the overconfidence level as given. In reality, the principal often can choose whom to hire. That is, let's assume the principal can choose the level of overconfidence. Let's draw the principal payoff as a function of the level of overconfidence. Under the commitment contract, the payoff has a hump-shaped form. To understand why this is the case, recall that under the commitment contract, there are two forces through which the overconfidence affects the principal's payoff: the cost effect and the oversaturation effect. We argue that the cost effect is stronger than the oversaturation effect for low eta, while the oversaturation effect is stronger for high eta. The cost effect makes the agent acquire more information at the margin, and so the principal's payoff increases for low eta. The oversaturation effect works in the opposite direction, and so the payoff decreases for high eta. To see why the cost effect prevails for low eta and the oversaturation effect prevails for high eta, observe that there is an asymmetry between the effects. The oversaturation effect strengthens with the increase in the learning time, while the cost effect is independent of the learning time. Suppose for a moment that the cost effect prevails, which means that the learning time increases. An increase in the learning time strengthens the oversaturation effect because it increases the amount of collected information through which the oversaturation effect operates. This channel is stronger for higher eta because the perceived precision of information collected during this additional learning time increases in eta. Hence, whenever the cost effect takes an upper hand, the oversaturation effect immediately strengthens in proportion to eta. And so, for high eta, the oversaturation effect prevails. The flexible contract adds the hyperacusis effect, which works against the principal. It's strong when the agent has little information, and so his beliefs are especially sensitive to noise in the observed process. That way, the hyperacusis effect is strong when the oversaturation effect is weak, and vice versa. The hyperacusis effect is weak when the oversaturation effect is strong. So since both effects work in the same direction, they uniformly overpower the cost effect. And that explains why under the flexible contract, the principal's payoff always decreases. This picture illustrates our first main result presented on the previous slide. For a given level of overconfidence, the principal chooses the commitment contract for high eta and the flexible contract for low eta. Now, let's allow the principal to select eta in addition to the contract type. According to this picture, she should hire an overconfident agent with the overconfidence level eta star C and offer him the commitment contract. In general, given the form of the curves, it's sufficient for the principal to compare her payoff at 2 points: at the peak of the commitment contract, eta star C, and at the lowest admissible level of overconfidence, which for concreteness, we take it as 1, which corresponds to the rational agent. If we change the learning cost, the point that gives a higher payoff might also change. And it turns out that hiring the rational agent and offering him the flexible contract is optimal for low learning cost, while hiring the overconfident agent and offering him the commitment contract is optimal for high learning cost. Intuitively, the advantage of overconfidence is in the cost effect, while the disadvantage is in the oversaturation and the hyperacusis effects. By choosing the commitment contract, the principal can eliminate the hyperacusis effect, but at the cost of losing the benefit of flexibility. As we increase the learning cost, C, the cost effect strengthens, and so hiring an overconfident agent becomes more appealing to the principal, and hence the principal optimally chooses the rational agent for low C and an overconfident agent for high C.
We check the robustness of our results to several extensions. First, throughout the paper, we rely on specific information technology, namely Brownian motion. If you take a general information technology, then under the commitment contract, the principal's payoff still has a hump-shaped form. Under the flexible contract, generalizing information technology is mathematically more challenging, and so we didn't pursue it. In the second extension, we allow for transfers between the principal and the agent. Specifically, we assume that the agent derives no intrinsic utility from making the correct guess, and that the contract specifies a fixed payment and a bonus that the agent receives if his guess is correct. If the agent has unlimited liability and is overconfident, that is, eta is greater than 1, then the principal can design the contract in such a way that she gets infinite expected payoff. However, for that, she has to ask the agent to pay her infinite amount if a guess is incorrect. That doesn't sound very realistic, and so we assume limited liability. And with limited liability, all results from the main model carry over. The most interesting extension is the extension to non-uniform prior. In that case, most of the results are robust, but not all of them. Two things are new. First, with non-uniform prior, the principal sometimes doesn't want to hire an agent at all. That happens when the learning cost is high, and so the agent would collect very little information. Given the bias in the prior and misperception of the collected information, it might be the case that the principal and the agent disagree on the best guess ex post. The agent is already convinced to change his guess to a priori less likely state, while the principal requires more information to do so. We intentionally choose to work with uniform prior in the main model to shut down any effects due to ex post disagreement between the principal and the agent. The second new thing that appears with non-uniform prior is that under the flexible contract, the interplay of the three effects is no longer unambiguous. With uniform prior, we get that the cost effect is always overpowered by the combination of the oversaturation and the hyperacusis effects. And so under the flexible contract, the principal's payoff always decreases in eta. When the prior is non-uniform, this is no longer the case, and the cost effect wins for low eta, so that the payoff has a hump-shaped form. Nevertheless, theorem 1 holds even under non-uniform prior, and theorem 2 holds partially.
To summarize, we show that the rational principal might prefer to hire an overconfident agent over the rational one, with the idea to exploit the agent's irrationality by making him to collect more information. However, this is possible only if the agent's hands are tied up by the commitment contract. Thank you for your attention.